Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low magazine? Because 4Low magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On today's episodes of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Tony Pellegrino. Yes, that's Tony from Genright. Tony's been in the off-road world for quite a while. We're going to find out exactly how long he has been and how Genright got started and everything about Tony. So, Tony, I want to say thank you for coming on board today and sitting down and talking with us and letting the listeners know something about you.
Pleasure to be here.
So let's jump right in with both feet, and we'll ask the most basic question of all. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born here in Southern California in Burbank. We lived in Thousand Oaks at the time, but that was the closest hospital. So, yeah, I basically grew up in Thousand Oaks. Okay.
So they're kind of the coast. Yeah, Thousand Oaks is it's an inland valley north of LA, but it's really, is it on the coast or is it just inside, like over the first little coastal range?
It's just inside that. So we're between Los Angeles and Ventura.
Okay.
But we're about, as a crow flies, 20 miles from the coast.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I went to college in Santa Barbara, and I had a roommate at one time that was from Thousand Oaks, so we'd go down there once in a while. And I don't remember seeing the beach, but I remember going to past the beach to get there.
Yeah, the 101 runs right through it. And then when you go through the 101, toward Camarillo, Ventura, it goes back along the coast.
That's right. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So you were born in Burbank, grew up or went to school in Thousand Oaks. So basically that's your hometown?
Yes. And when I was in high school, they expanded and started another high school over in Westlake Village. And I lived on the line where I got transferred halfway through high school over to Westlake Village.
Oh, what was that like? Was it all of a sudden you were in with new kids, or were you in with the same kids?
Some were the same, some were new. The school was brand new. So as far as I was concerned, it was totally cool because Thousand Oaks High School, where I'd started, everything was old. They had old projectors, old everything. And then when you went to the new school, it was all video and nice. So I actually really welcomed the new school.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Did you go over, when you transferred schools, did they start off all the way through 12th grade, or did they start off with, a certain age and then bring everybody in?
Yeah, here in California, it's 9 through 12 is considered high school. So I moved over for my junior year, 11th grade. So I finished 11th and 12th at the new school.
Okay. What did you do in Thousand Oaks when you were a kid? I mean, besides going to school, did you go play up in the mountains, or what was your go-to on free time?
Well, here's a tidbit that most people don't know is I actually, from grade 1 through 8, went to parochial school. So,
oh, really? I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah. I'm the oldest of 3 boys, and we were absolute terrors. We terrorized the babysitter. We terrorized everything, each other. we were a handful and a half. So my parents wisely sent us to parochial school to straighten us out. And that actually served me quite well. When I got out of that in eighth grade, to go to high school in ninth grade, I couldn't believe how disrespectful the students were to the teachers. I was in complete shock how they treated it was just crazy.
Right.
Obviously, that also had me better prepared for high school because the curriculum in the private school was much more stern. So it actually made it quite easy for me to go to high school. So that was nice.
Okay, and then so Tim went to parochial school too as well?
Oh yeah. All three, and my brother Tom. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's Tony, Tim, and Tom. Yeah.
Okay, and Tom I've never met. Okay.
No, Tom is he lives down in San Diego. He's has been a principal, a superintendent. He's in the school system. So
Oh, okay.
he's,
So he's the responsible one.
he is the responsible one. Yeah, and he's got a nice family down there. Tim also lives down that direction too, but Tom has stayed out of the off-road world. He loves it. He comes out and enjoys it whenever he can. He's been at every King of the Hammers, brings his son, just loves it, but just not part of his world right now.
Okay.
So
how about in high school? What were your interests?
well, actually, I want to back up if I
Okay.
can.
Sure.
So when we got home from school, we Thousand Oaks was very rural back then, and we would literally come home and get right on our motorcycles or our BMX bikes and go ride. And it was wide open back then. That's all I dreamed about was just getting home from school and taking off, and it was so much fun. Our rule was we just had to be back by dark. That's back then there was no cell phones or pagers or anything, right? So
Yep.
you either survived or you didn't. It was one of those things.
The reason we don't get sick.
Yeah, and you had to have some grit and be tough, or you just faded away.
Yes.
We spent a lot of trips in the emergency room as well. They knew us on a first name basis because we were wild.
So then the bicycling and motorcycles, when did you get your first motorized motorcycle?
So my dad started me on a mini bike when I was age 5.
Oh, wow.
And there's actually a picture in my office of me on that mini bike. It was published in the back then the local newspaper, because in Thousand Oaks they have what they call Canal Valley Days, and the Canal Valley Days was not only a parade and a carnival and all that stuff, but motorcycle racing was actually part of Canal Valley Days. So
Nice.
I got started on that, and I've been on a motorized 2-wheel vehicle ever since then.
Cool. Did you take tech classes in high school, or were you more academia, or were you sports orientated?
That's a great question too. No, I although I enjoyed baseball and I did play, soccer and did those things as a kid, by the time I got to high school, I was very interested in cars. I took metal shop and architecture classes. I wanted to be able to design. I wanted to be able to do different things. So I enjoyed all of those. I never took wood shop, but although I was interested in it, I didn't have that many electives that I could do. Although today I build my own furniture, I'm a pretty handy woodworker as well.
Wow.
Woodworking's quite forgiving compared to metalworking. So, but I'm a full accomplished machinist, both manual machines and CNC.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I never got into the machining end. My dad was a machinist, tool die maker, model maker, went all the way through all the trades and stuff, or the levels. But I never got into that stuff. He never did CNC. It was all manual. And I'm not a very good woodworker. I always tell everybody I can build a hell of a deck. Just don't ask me to do any finish work.
See, and I love the finish work.
I think I've got too much ADD to sit there and make sure everything's just perfect. No way. With your shop classes and stuff, when did you get your first car and what was it?
So what when I was in metal shop, I think it was my senior year. I won an award that I didn't even realize this was a thing, but my metal shop teacher recognized the projects that I was building. At the time, I built a four-wheel drive radio controlled car from scratch, machined the differentials, did everything. And
Nice.
the teacher was so amazed that he nominated me for an industrial arts award, which I won. That was really when I kind of woke up that maybe I had some talent. So that's when I kind of embraced that and thought, okay, maybe this is my calling in life. And, I love making things and I love making them better than the manufacturer ever intended. So that's kind of been my thing.
Sweet. And then going to that first vehicle, you said you had motorcycles and stuff, but what was the first four-wheel?
So when I got my driver's license, I bought a Datsun two-wheel drive pickup truck that I was determined to turn into a four-wheel drive. At the time, there was a company in Azusa called Low Manufacturing, and they were racing a Class 7 down in Baja truck that they had converted. They did Datsun, they did a Chevy Love. They had these conversion kits for them, and I was absolutely amazed at that and wanted one terribly bad. Of course, typical kid, didn't have any money, and I got to tell you, I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. That's for darn sure. I had to pay for my own car, pay for my own gas, pay for my own insurance. I was never handed anything. And, I had friends that did get all that stuff, and I was quite jealous. But later in life, I came to appreciate that those things were never handed to me because I was much more responsible with money. It also gives you that drive to, you want something, you figure out a way to get it. You work an extra job, you do whatever it is. If you got stuff laying around that you're not using, sell it. It makes you resourceful.
Exactly.
Yep.
So what did you do with that pickup? Did you get it converted to four-wheel drive?
So I never got the Datsun converted to four-wheel drive. I lifted it, I gave it a body lift. I put it on 33s. I drove the daylights out of it. I'll tell you a funny story. I used to, after school work, everything, I would take it out at night and wheel it in the hills because remember, we lived in this rural area.
Right.
Well, I had a curfew of 11 p.m. And we were trying to get up this hill climb, me and my buddy. We ended up wrecking the forward gears in the transmission. So I only had reverse, and I knew I had a curfew, so I had to drive that thing all the way home in reverse, and it was a long way. We were probably 5 or 10 miles out. And I remember thinking, well, if I'm going in reverse, which side of the street should I actually be on? Right? But, back then it was a fairly small town, and at night, they rolled up the sidewalk, so there was really nobody out, and I was able to drive it all the way home and make it in time for my curfew.
Oh, so you didn't get grounded too.
I didn't get grounded, and then I talked my dad into giving me a ride over to the junkyard where I did a pick apart, where I pulled another transmission and then put it in my truck.
Nice.
So
cool. Then from there, high school, you said work, did you go to college at all?
So during high school, I worked as a mechanic at a bicycle shop. I worked at several different bicycle shops, and that was actually really good pay because if you had any kind of mechanical expertise, I typically made another $5 an hour more than all the other minimum wage jobs. So that was pretty good gig. And on the side, for extra money, I taught BMX racing classes because I raced BMX as a kid, and then was able to. We had this whole customer base of people, and I was able to tap into that and do lessons on the weekend and stuff. So that was pretty cool too.
Oh, excellent.
Well, and then I always during this entire time, my dad had a high jumper dune buggy. Then he and I would go to Pismo and do that kind of stuff. And then he got a Baja bug, and we messed around with that a little bit. But ultimately, he got a 77 Dodge Power Wagon with a big V8, and it had a Dana 60 in the front and rear. He got all the options. The thing was fully loaded, lockers, the whole thing. And he and I would constantly go four-wheeling. And that's what really gave me the bug to want to go four-wheeling and off-roading. So yeah, that was pretty cool. We did a lot of camping. We went all over the place, big trips, he and I, and yeah, that really kind of got me inspired, and watching other vehicles and how to make them better. And people were breaking stuff all over the place, so it just made me aware of all of that.
So from that time working at the bike shop, and then going through high school, and then you get into that, graduate from high school. Were you, is that where you met Debbie, or did that come later?
That came later. And I'll tell you a funny thing. My dad saw me always working on my car, right? And he kept thinking, he would come over to me and say, you're spending too much money on that car. You're spending too much time on that car. You need to be focused on other stuff. And then, of course, I had a girlfriend in the mix. So, I was spending every dime I made either on her or on the car. And he wasn't particularly happy about that. Now, little did he know, what course or path in my life was going to take, that I was well served by doing all that stuff. But at the time, he was thinking it was a giant waste of time.
I understand. Did your dad have one of those jobs where he was like in the job for his whole entire career or life?
He did, yes. He worked at Litton. He's an engineer, and I wanted to be an engineer too. I thought he had a great gig. I really did. And my intent, when I got into high school and started meeting with a guidance counselor, was I wanted to be an engineer. So when I started junior college, that was my path. It was kind of interesting, when I think it was the end of the second year of taking engineering classes, the instructor wanted us to do research on which branch of engineering you were going to go into. Was it mechanical, electronic, civil? And when you chose which field you wanted to go into, what the pay would be when you started after you got out of college. Well, I did the homework. I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, and the pay was $30,000. What was amazing was that summer, I got a job in a warehouse. It was actually part of the bicycle industry at the time.
Okay.
And I made $30,000, the pay rate that I was making by working in that warehouse, because at first I was kind of a junior guy in the warehouse. And by the end of the summer, they had me worked up into, I don't remember what it was, customer service or something. Well, I was making like $40,000 by the time I was done. So I started going, well, another 2 years of college and I'm going to make less than I'm making right now. That's when I did the math, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to work at this. The company I was in, I loved. People there were super nice. And I eventually worked my way up into product development at that company. So, and then by then I was making like $60,000 a year. So to me, I was going, wow, man, I'm well on the path to where I want to be. And that actually worked out pretty good. Now, what was interesting was where I lived in Thousand Oaks, there was a guy that lived across the street. And I, said hello like you do to a neighbor, didn't really know much about the guy. He drove nice cars and stuff. Well, one day he walks across the street and starts talking to me. He was complimenting my car, and he always saw me out there working on it or washing it or, something, right?
Right.
So he goes, here's my card. If you ever want a job, I want you to come see me. He goes, I don't meet very, many young people that have the kind of go that you do. So he's like, if you're interested, let me know. So it was just over in Newberry Park, which was very close to where I was working at the time. So I swung by at lunchtime, only to figure out that what the guy did was machinery sales. So mills, lathes, grinders, all kinds of machinery like you'd use in a machine shop. So the guy immediately offered me a job for double what I was making at the bicycle place.
Nice.
And I took it. I was like, heck yeah, this is awesome. And that opened the door to a whole bunch of other manufacturing, that I, of course, love. It was great. It really kind of paved the way for what my career path was going to be. And, it's funny how you just kind of land on these things. I would have never chosen that path, but I worked my way up through the machinery industry into some of the top companies, got a bunch of formal training on how to use equipment and do different things. I actually spent quite a bit of time over in Japan learning how they make things over there, in terms of just-in-time process, and then ended up bringing that back to customers here in the United States. So very, very interesting, loved it, enjoyed that whole process.
That's intriguing. I had no clue. This is what I love about doing these interviews.
And hopefully, and I don't know that I've ever told that story to anybody, So,
excellent.
Yeah.
So then when through the processing and the equipment and all of that, you got the training, it took your engineering background, though limited, you didn't get your degree, although I don't believe that the degrees are that important as long as you have the drive and you're easily teachable. Some people just, you got to have a degree. I'm one of those. I got a degree, but I don't even use it. What I was trained in. So I love hearing that. Well,
I think the degree for most people is important because what it shows your potential employer is that you had what it took to see something through.
Right.
So whether you're using it in the field you studied or not, you stuck with it and you finished, and you can say, all right, I know what it takes to get through something in its entirety.
True.
So I've only learned that in later years in life that was really. Now there are some people, obviously if you're going to be a doctor or something, you've got to have that kind of training.
Well, yeah, because those actually come with certifications and all that kind of stuff. So I totally get that. One of the things where I got to learn to complete and follow through was in scouting and getting my Eagle Scout. That's where that was an early drive, learn to complete things, move on to the next, and get things done to obtain that goal.
Yep. And by the way, if I meet anybody that comes to interview for a job here that became an Eagle Scout, I hire them. Those people are drivers. They know what it takes. Yes.
True.
Yep.
So then, from that job, obviously you have progressed into your own. But did you step away from that and start your own thing, or did you stay at that machine sales company for a long time? What was the next step in the process?
So I spent several years at the machine sales company, and during that time, when I first started there was back when President Reagan was in office and aerospace was booming. I had no idea what a gold mine I had just stepped into. And I made lots of money. Business was cranking. And of course, once he was out of office, that changed. And I could see the slump in what was happening within manufacturing. And I just decided, it was time to kind of move on. Now, at the time, I had just met Debbie and knew that she was the one. So it was time to start making arrangements and turning that into a permanent partner, right?
Right.
So we got married, and a few years later, had our first child, Jamie, which is awesome. We had a nice place that we lived in Westlake Village. I made enough money. And she was also working too at a place called IBM, small company back then. And we both had really nice incomes, so we were able to afford a pretty nice place to live. What I didn't know, what nobody ever warned me of, was when once she had a baby and she was going to stay home because we decided we didn't want our child raised by somebody else, that all of that burden and that lifestyle we'd now become accustomed to fell on my shoulders. So that meant I really needed to start kicking some butt because I had to replace two incomes, right?
Yes.
So something within me said, hey, you've got all this manufacturing expertise. Why don't you buy some of these CNC machines that you've been selling and start your own company? And at the time, I was really into mountain bikes. I thought, you know what? I'm going to start a mountain bike component company where we make, the brakes, the hubs, the seat posts, the crank arms, all the components that go on the bike.
Okay.
And they were really high end, all made out of good materials. I did that company for 7 years, and it was also right there in Westlake Village. So it was, a half mile from where I lived.
Oh, nice.
So that was pretty cool. I worked like an absolute dog. What I failed to recognize, there was actually several things about that business that I learned from. First, people that ride mountain bikes typically don't have any money, right? They're like hikers. They're trying to do it on the cheap.
Right.
Second, I bought all the equipment, and what that did was it tied up all my capital in machines and material, and I had no money for marketing. Huge mistake.
Yep.
So I met a guy a few years later. I think I ran that business for like 7 years, and then I met a guy who bought it from me. That worked out perfect. I was on under contract to work for him for a few years and then go my separate way. So one of the things that I learned from the mountain bike company was here in the United States, bicycles are recreation, and everywhere else in the world, they are transportation.
True.
So we sold 95% of our parts outside of the United States.
Wow.
Yeah. And the orders were huge. So what I became an expert in was exporting.
Okay.
So my next company, you're going to love this story. I met a guy who was a computer geek. Now, at the time, I only used computers to write a Word document or do email, right? I was very, like, even the talk of the internet, I was like, you're crazy. Nobody's ever going to buy anything on the internet. That's a sketchy place to be. Keep in mind, this is back in like 94, right?
Right.
So back when there was dial-up, it was totally slow, DOS, maybe Windows 95, like, woohoo, Windows 95. I met this guy who was a computer geek. He and I chatted about my ability to export. So he goes, we should start a company that helps other American companies export their goods. So we sat down with a guy who was a VP at Hewlett-Packard. And I told him about my idea. We just talked, right? There was no presentation. There was no more than you and I are doing right now.
Okay.
And he looks at me and he goes, this is a great idea. He goes, do you think you could do this? I'm like, yeah, totally. He strokes us a check for $500,000.
Wow.
And just says, do it. Because back then the .coms were going nuts. So people were investing money, like crazy money, in anything, right? This is back when Yahoo was just like going berserk. We developed the company. Now it had milestones, right? So we had to create a website. We had to, find all these portals and gather the right companies. And then we flew over to Europe and went into Amsterdam and set up a warehouse so that all of the goods could be landed at the importing company's cost, because there's VAT, which is a tax that's assessed on everything over there. So if you buy something from here, you pay the VAT, which is a value added tax based on its cost, right? So
Right.
as a consumer, you're paying full tilt, right? So as a manufacturer, your cost is obviously much lower. So you pay the VAT on that. And then when you sell the goods, you pay the difference. So it was a much better way to import all the products. So my partner and I went over there. In Europe, FedEx is much bigger than UPS. So we partnered with FedEx to do all of our distribution. So when the goods landed in this warehouse in Amsterdam, then everything got delivered by FedEx. So the user would place an order online. The manufacturer would process the order through that warehouse. So it would get picked, pulled, and delivered in a couple of days, right? Instead of waiting weeks for it to get there on some boat. So it was a really cool idea. It took off. It was great. And we sold the company 2 years later.
Nice.
So I took that money and banked it. We at the time, I'm going to take a slight divergence here.
Okay.
While I was working at that company, I decided, since I was sitting next to this computer geek, I would learn computers. So the guy taught me how to use Outlook, how to stay organized, how to do everything associated with a computer, Photoshop, including build my own website. So at the time, I told you my RC car story way back in high school, right? I've always kind of been into RC stuff, planes, cars, boats. So at the time, I had just built a radio control boat that I was, it was like my passion for, side time, right? So I was on the internet. I couldn't find anything on radio control boats. So I decided I was going to have this guy teach me how to build a website. So I built a website about radio control boats. Well, it didn't take 30 days, and I was getting all of these emails inquiring where I found the parts, how they could buy them, blah, blah, blah. So I came home from work and I told Debbie, who was staying home with our son, I said, rather than me referring all these people, why don't we create a little company that you could work from home? So Rich, it was really funny. We started buying these radio control parts and reselling them to people all over the world. And Debbie, became a great shipping manager, and she managed the whole thing, right? Because the website I set up was at the very beginning of a shopping cart, right? So people could just buy online. We didn't have to talk to anybody. We didn't have to do anything. They just bought it and it shipped.
Nice.
This business literally went from like $1,000 a year to $1,000 a month to $10,000 a month. Like, it just took off. Meantime, Debbie and I are like, holy cow, we don't want to hire any employees. So, but the job was getting too big for her, right? Alone. Now, next thing I know, my entire garage is just a warehouse of radio control boat parts. Right? I got nowhere to even put my Jeep anymore. Yeah, that became very interesting. And actually, we haven't touched on where the Jeep came in.
Yeah, I just wrote that down as you said it to come
Okay.
back to.
So we'll circle back to that. So anyways, when I started Genright, I originally had a business partner, and his only requirement was that I had no other side interests or businesses. So he required me to sell Fun RC boats, which we did, which was that was the name of our boat radio control boat company.
Okay.
The bummer is that guy lasted 3 months and threw in the towel. Like I came into his office and he goes, I don't want to do this anymore. I couldn't believe it. I was so distraught, right? And by then we had already proven Genright was a good thing, and it was cranking. So, I just bought him out, and that took care of that, because at that time it had already started making money. So he just had his fingers in too many things, and he had some personal stuff going on. So I understood his situation, but I wasn't about to abandon Genright, that's for sure.
And what year did Genright start?
So that started in, I want to say 99 or no. It was later than that. It was It must have been
2004?
2004 or 5. Yeah, because
Okay.
we just had our 15-year anniversary, so 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went
Yeah.
from the shipping business online, but you were helping suppliers or manufacturers get their goods over there. So you were warehouse shipping type thing, or were you the importer?
So there's a bit of overlap there. So we had the company that was exporting to Europe, right? Then we sold that. But at the same time, we had this radio control boat company.
Okay.
Then when we sold the export company, radio control boats is still going.
Right.
I started helping other machine shops find work. And some of that work was in the off-road business. So I started to become familiar with the off-road business. Now, meantime, I was still riding dirt bikes with my family. So we had a whole group of people that we were going out to California City on the weekends and enjoying off-roading the entire time.
Right.
Well, as my family got bigger, right now we had a second child, Jordan. We decided that it was probably time that dad shouldn't get hurt, right? We got too many responsibilities. So that's when I got a Jeep. We had also just bought a motorhome. So we figured out real quick that, the motorhome was great, but then when you get somewhere, you got no way to get around. So it didn't take me long to figure out that everybody with a motorhome was towing a Jeep. So I talked Debbie into getting a Jeep. Then we went up to Calico. And at the time, we had brought my dad on this camping trip just up to Calico. It was just for a nice weekend when my dad and I ran into a Jeep club. And these guys had Jeeps that were totally built. And that got our wheels turning. So then what happened was my dad got a Jeep too. And everything I had already put on my Jeep, I sold to my dad, right? So he was getting all my takeoffs as I built up my Jeep. So part of what happened was, and what, how Genright came to be, is I finally upgraded to Dynatrac Pro Rock 60s. Well, those don't fit in the same location that a stock axle fits, right? As soon as I went out of the driveway, the differential cover smacked into the gas tank.
Right.
So I called Dynatrac. I'm like, hey, what are people doing about this? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Never heard of this problem.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. So I was in manufacturing, right? So I'm like, I got this, like, no problem. Beside the fact that the stock Jeep skid plate was less than 1/8 inch thick, it was like some cheesy sheet metal thing, and the tank was plastic. I'm like, this crap's got to go anyways. So I redesigned a tank, and because I was in manufacturing, I literally just went to the shop, cut all the pieces, had one of the welders weld it all together, and I had myself a gas tank that not only cleared this bigger differential, but it allowed me to move the rear axle back, because now that you've got lower gearing and bigger tires, well, now you got all this traction, and you needed more wheelbase because it was just lifting the front end off the ground every time you wanted to climb something.
Right.
So this was literally like, I wasn't even thinking about Genright. All I was doing was making parts for myself. Didn't care. I just wanted a badass Jeep. So it didn't take long, because at the time I belonged to a Jeep club as well, before people were standing around going, where'd you get that? I'm like, what? Why are you even looking underneath my Jeep? This is like, checking out my butt, like, come on. And no, it was weird. Debbie and I would go to the grocery store, and there'd be people like looking underneath, pointing at it, and like, where'd you get that gas tank? And I'm looking at Debbie, and I go, we've got something here. Like, this is, if that many people are noticing something underneath the Jeep, like, we need to do something about this. So at the time, it was SEMA was just about to come. So I took my invention, just pictures of it, and I went to SEMA, and I met with a few different companies. A couple of companies said, what are you talking about? Nobody's ever asked for anything like that. Like, no, like, there's no need for that. A couple of other companies went, Do not show this to anybody else. I'll sign whatever you want. We'll buy everything you can make. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. You know, they don't know anything, right? But they were willing to buy everything I could make. So at the time, I had a friend of mine who was pretty well to do. He was with me and he heard these conversations. And when we walked out of there, he goes, don't you dare sign anything with these people. He goes, you have something here. Let's start a company. He goes, all funded. Because I go, dude, Debbie doesn't want me to start another company. Like, we've already been down this road, you know. I just need a regular job, you know, with a 401k and blah, 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 right? Security, right? I got 2 kids.
The way our parents grew up.
Yes. So I go home, I'm talking to Debbie, and she's like, no way. And I said, okay, well, what if it doesn't take any of our money, right? Because the other companies that I had before, you know, we were so invested that if things went sideways, we would have been living out of a cardboard box, right? So, you know, and especially that first company, the bicycle component company, you know, I was signed on for hundreds of thousands. It might have even been $1 million worth of equipment, you know, for 5 and 7 year, you know, financial commitments. Like that was a heavy burden, right?
Right.
I said, okay, well, this other gentleman has offered to completely fund the company. We would take a regular paycheck, you know, it would be like working at another job. And she said, all right, if that's truly the arrangement, then I'm good. You can do it. Now, the problem was this was right before 2008 and 2009, which, you know, was like the crash of our entire economy.
Correct.
Right. So here I am trying to ramp up a company right before then. Now, the good news was I had enough drive and got the ball rolling in 2005, 6, and 7 that I had just enough momentum that as the other companies in the industry, which were, by the way, huge back then, you know, when you look at Fab Tech and all these other guys, they were such machines that they couldn't get out of their own way. And a lot of them either went out of business or went bankrupt or something, right? Got bought up, you know. It was a major change with the industry. But I had enough momentum that I never saw a slowdown because I was lean and I was a startup just coming up.
You didn't have all the layers of bureaucracy.
Yep. And overhead, right? So that was awesome. And now the downside is because I knew I needed to stay lean from my bicycle component company, right? Which had high overhead. That meant I had to move 5 times, right? So I started out with I rented an office within a place, right? And then I got my own tiny little like 600 square foot warehouse. And then I moved from there to a little bit bigger place and, you know, to where we are today, right? And even today, you know, we've got our main building, and then I had to get a building across the street, another 10,000 feet across the street, because we're outgrowing this building. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of water under the bridge to get us where we are today. But I just wanted to tell you that story of, you know, how we originally got started, you know, where I took it to SEMA, there was interest, and then that generated, you know, an investor to actually get Genright going. But that investor only made it 3 months, okay, and then I had to buy him out, right? So that didn't take long.
And Debbie was like, "This is not what we signed up for."
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But by then, she could see too that it had potential. You know, she was like, "Oh my God, you know, this is awesome." So the good thing is that by then, before Genright started, I already had my Jeep built. I had already built the entire thing in the garage. We had, at the time, our big Class A Monaco motorhome, you know, trailer. We had acquired all these things personally. So it wasn't like the business had to buy all these things. So by the time I started Genright, the only thing it needed to do was build inventory, which was perfect because you can turn that inventory and make money.
Right.
So, because I was in manufacturing, I worked out deals with a bunch of local machine and fabrication shops that I knew to manufacture the products for me. So really my job was to market and keep inventory, right? So that's how that worked out, because I knew the manufacturing side was not where you wanted to invest your money.
Right.
But that's a fine line, because when you're small, the manufacturers don't want to pay attention to you. You're more of a ankle biter and trouble than you're worth.
Right.
Right? Because manufacturing is on volume. So it really took some smooth talking on my part to convince these guys that I was a good gamble, right, and keep them happy. So it was definitely interesting, and I would say for the first probably 5 years, maybe 6 years of Genright's life, that it was touch and go. Like that at any time, if something had gone sideways on us, it could have wiped us out for sure.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. Now the other thing that I should mention is, because my first product was gas tanks, that is the worst possible, from a product liability standpoint, product you could make.
Even worse than bumpers?
Even worse than bumpers, even worse than steering, right? The downside to this whole thing is that I've had to carry, really high product liability all this time, like $10,000 a month. It's terrible, like crazy expensive. So that's been my big burden, to build the company to be able to a point to where it was able to absorb that and not be like that heavy load every day.
Right.
So, and then of course, when I wanted to expand into suspension or steering or anything, my product liability guy's like, dude, you make gas tanks, you can make anything you want.
You didn't make gas tanks for Pintos, right?
No. And those were terrible. Those were held in with two thin little metal straps, and so the moment, if you'd even backed into something, the dang gas tank would have fallen out and, started leaking. So those were terrible.
Yeah. And then there was a bolt that if somebody rear-ended it, it would push into the bolt and puncture
and pierce the
gas
tank.
Yes.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. Today, even when I started Genright, the CJ, YJ, TJ all had rear-mounted gas tanks. Those were designed that if you got rear-ended, the whole tank sat down below the frame cross members. So the bolts were designed to shear off and let the gas tank fall. It was actually very clever. I did a whole bunch of research on it before I even made my own, to kind of figure out how this whole thing went. And they learned a lot from the Pinto days, for sure.
Right.
So, yep.
So then gas tanks, and then the incorporated skid was the first product for Genright?
First product, yeah. And it literally, so I told you I went to SEMA, right? We made it 3 months. The next event was Easter Jeep Safari.
Okay.
So I built a tank for the CJ/YJ. I built one for the TJ. I had some where you could stretch the wheelbase. I had some where that, if you kept your stock axle, you could go to 25 gallons. I made 5 or 6 different tanks. And I set up a 10 by 20 display at Easter Jeep. And in 2 days by myself, standing in the booth, I sold 50 gas tanks.
Wow.
Yeah, like that easy. So I knew right away, I was like, holy crap, like we've got something here. I mean, this is, if by myself, if I could do that, like we're sailing here, So after that was when I, and this is back, again, the internet, the advertising was done through magazines. There was no internet advertising.
Right.
So I literally loaded up my motorhome with gas tanks. I think I had, 20 of them. And I started driving around to see all the shops, around the country, and came back empty. I mean, everyone I stopped at, they bought a gas tank. They knew, everybody knew this was something highly needed, because everybody was upgrading the axle in their Jeep.
Right.
So think about this. Remember, back at SEMA, there were companies that I won't even say the names because it's embarrassing for them, that were like, Nobody's asked for this. Like, there's no need for that, right? That's how disconnected these companies were from what was going on in off-road.
From reality.
From reality. Yeah, because what I realize, and you can see it even in me today, is there's too many guys that started a company maybe with the right intentions, but they become completely removed from off-roading, and they sit in an office in some ivory tower, for lack of a better description, and they don't off-road. They don't know what's needed. They don't know what people are doing. They are totally disconnected, and that is not me. So even this morning, talking to you, I've just come back from a 900-mile off-road trip.
Nice.
Testing my brand new JL that we just did our full coilover conversion suspension on. And all I wanted to do is just go rattle on desert roads for 900 miles. So again, the only way is if you do it.
Right.
So I've just stayed true to that. And if you're in it and doing it, then you know what people need. And quite honestly, like the gas tank, what I'm trying to do is come up with the next products before people even realize they need them, right? Nobody knew they needed a gas tank till I showed them one. And then they're like, yeah, geez, why didn't anybody do this before?
True enough.
So
then what was that first Jeep you had? Was it a TJ?
No, worse. It was a 1987 YJ with a 5-speed Peugeot transmission. The only good thing on that Jeep was that it was the serpentine belt version, because there was also a V-belt version.
Yep.
So I got the serpentine one. So I didn't know anything about Jeeps, right? I just thought a Jeep's a Jeep. I found this one. It was clean. It was a Laredo. It was black with chrome accents. The thing was clean. Like nobody's ever even taken it over a bush. I mean, it was super clean. I don't even think it had ever even been shifted into four-wheel drive. And, it had air conditioning. It had all the stuff that, if you're not a Jeep guy, you think is important, when only to quickly realize that none of that stuff matters.
AC is nice.
It is nice. Now that I have my JL, there's a lot of creature comforts that I feel a little guilty for enjoying.
I've always had, I had an old military M38A1, a CJ5, and then I had a flat fender, and then I got into Cherokees, and because I liked the ability to roll up the window, have AC, and not eat dust. Then I found out that when you're actually wheeling a Cherokee, you can't have the AC on because you have an undersized radiator. So you have to have the windows down. And then it's like, okay, now I got these doors that are not easy to take off. I got this hard top, so I can't open up and get, the fresh air like you really want in a Jeep. So it's like, okay, wrong.
Yeah, beside the fact that those big rear windows get really close to obstacles on the trail, right?
Yes. You learn to drive better if you don't want to break them. But.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
But we just
go
ahead.
The Cherokee was great because it had a 103-inch wheelbase and it was light.
Yes.
So those things wheeled awesome. And it took me a while. I sat and watched a bunch of those go up, things like Widowmaker, to realize okay, the reason they're able to do that and a Wrangler's not able to is because of that wheelbase. And really all I've done is just take notice of things and then be able to act on that. That's really all I've done.
And you've got a great product line. That's obvious.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean we're trying to at least do it right, American made, and provide a good quality product. And yeah, it's a little more expensive, but you get what you pay for. Yeah. And that's the bottom line. You want cheap, you get Chinese stuff. It's just the way it is.
Yep. So my experience or my belief is because of that housing downturn and the market, the thing that, that 08, 09, it was because of the housing, the overinflated ability to make purchases and people getting upside down and owing too much money on houses and toys and everything else, and then the economy crashes. The thing that saved the off-road industry was companies being lean and mean and being able to pivot and maybe downsize or at least cut back enough but not go away. And then the beginning of the JK.
Yes. Yeah. So that's an interesting topic, right? Because they were bought up by Daimler,
Yep.
right? A German company that brought them new information, right? Information they've never had access to, that taught the Jeep Chrysler engineers how to better make a vehicle. It was a very interesting time. And the people that I know at Jeep fought that change. They did not like it at all. But look at where we are today. There's 2.6 million JKs. That's more than CJ, YJ, and TJ combined.
Right.
Right.
And it brought so many new people into the market because the vehicle was easy, four-door. It was easier to get in and out of.
Yep.
You could comfortably take people with you. You know, you could use it as a van, soccer mom vehicle, whatever you want to call it. But the purists were so anti-JK. And now all of those purists that stayed in business because of the JK are the ones that they all have to look at it and say, you know what, that change was great because it saved our industry.
Yes, in hindsight, it was great. I'm one of the ones that fought it bad,
So
because
was I.
the first time I drove one, I'm like, this is like driving a Suburban off-road. Like, who would do this? This is crazy. Only to realize that, boy, that wheelbase is nice. Look at the obstacles, you can do without, living on the edge of death, right?
Yep.
And it was really just an upsized XJ, right, with a removable top and removable doors.
Correct.
So it really did kind of fit a nice niche in the car market for Jeep Chrysler, right? I mean, it was brilliant on their part, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And for those of us in the industry, I'm not a manufacturer, I'm not a fabricator, I don't, sell parts, but I try to help companies sell parts through our events and now the magazine. So to me, I looked at it and said, I'm not going to see JKs out competing at rock crawls. Every once in a while we'll get somebody at our Delta Classic, what was called the old school rock crawl in Delta, Utah. We get some JKs showing up and now some JLs because we have a street division. But we don't get people competing, in a full blown JK, But then again, we don't have the stock vehicles like we used to in the the old mod stock rigs, the CJ7s and the YJs and the 5s and the Suzukis. We rarely get those anymore. They've been hacked, and now we have a sportsman class that we call Sportsman C, which is kind of that same for the more street vehicle. So
yeah, and frankly, that stuff just times out. It ages out, right? You can only bend a piece of metal so many times before it just fatigues and breaks.
Correct.
Right? So when you're talking about older CJs or YJs, man, those have been around a long time.
True
right?
enough.
Some 40 years. You just can't cycle that piece of metal that many times. So that's why you're seeing fewer and fewer of them, right?
No, I agree.
No, it's great. I think it's awesome that you're offering those classes because it just engages people. It gets them inspired. And that's really what I've been trying to do, is get people interested in off-roading and interested in building their Jeep and doing it the right way, not redneck style out blazing your own trails and leaving trash, right? There needs to be some responsibility there.
True.
So
and that's one of the things that I appreciate about your company and yourself and some of the other companies that are built on the same premise as yours or built the same way is that you guys are wheelers and you have that understanding of land use. You have the understanding of
like ethics and etiquette.
Etiquette.
Yes.
That's it. Exactly.
Yes.
Etiquette.
Yeah.
Trail etiquette. You take out you used to take out and do the Genright runs out at the Hammers, and it would teach the people that bought your products that lifestyle, that etiquette,
Yep.
the trail etiquette, and how you're supposed to treat everything, instead of, well, like the UTV market is nowadays. Anybody can afford to buy one if you can, pay your $200 a month. You can take a vehicle that's very capable, go out and enjoy the outdoors, but you don't know, if you're brand new to it, you don't know what you don't know. So the thing is you're going out there, you're going off trail, you're going anywhere you want, because that's the way the advertisements show it. Oh, I can blast down this stream,
I was going to say the salesman told me this thing will go anywhere, right? Yeah. Okay, well, anywhere, yeah. Oh, and I can move the seat forward and put my 9-year-old behind it and turn him loose so he's not bugging me, right? There's just a lot about it that I'm not a fan of the side-by-side. It brings that whole class of irresponsible driver out there, or user. Right. And like we've just seen in Moab, they want to outlaw them. They're like done with them.
Yes. And it's funny because right now, we wintered this. Right now we're in the south central Texas Gulf area. So we're in the Corpus Christi area, and one of the cities over here is now just passed an ordinance that'll take effect on the 14th of this month, where you're going to be able to license your UTV to drive on the street, just like they do in Utah.
Arizona, yeah.
Yeah, in Arizona. And you got to put a light package on it and all this kind of stuff. And it's called, the community is Aransas Pass, and it's more on the inland side and not the island side. We're on the island side where all the sand dunes are at. And people are talking about, oh, wouldn't that be nice? And I'm like, no. Right now there's rules against driving in the sand dunes. You can't even build through the sand dunes. It's a natural barrier for the hurricanes to keep, the rest of the coastal area, in shape. And people are going, oh, that won't happen. And it's like, bullshit. I see it happen everywhere.
Yeah. That's true.
People are going, oh no, people are going to be buying like the ranchers, and they're not going to be buying the race models. And I'm like, bullshit. You get a chance to buy a tractor, or you get the chance to go buy a Corvette for the same price. You're buying the Corvette.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. And I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, we were out on our way back on that big 900-mile trip, and I stopped for a minute to change something on the Jeep, and some side-by-sides came by. And I stepped over near the edge of the trail to wave at all of them, like, hi, how you doing, And one of them just totally roosted me in my Jeep. Like, as he went by, he just stood on the gas, and I was like, what a dick.
Yes.
I mean, come on, dude. What are you thinking?
I have a really great story. In fact, I think we probably talked about it before sitting at Danny Grimes's. But it was, I don't want to get into it because it'll be names, but somebody did that at Moab and roosted a bunch of people that he was sitting behind the trail on for the whole time, coming up Pritchett. And after they got clear of Pritchett, he went by this whole group of manufacturers and just roosted all the cars because he'd been sitting and those people were like, you know what? I will never sponsor anybody ever again because of that guy.
Yep.
And it's like, and that was, one of our own racers. And it's, it's a shame that people don't think about that.
Yes. And I was going to mention that to you. When I saw Ultra 4 cars being brought out to Easter Jeep Safari, that was a bad idea. Like, I don't know whose idea that was, but I would never, ever, ever, even in a Jeep, right? When I go to pass somebody I'll pull up next to them and say, hey, do you mind if I, carry on or play through or something, you don't just buzz by them. People get super pissed about that.
Yes.
And if you do, you go really slow. Do not dust them out. Do not spray rocks. I mean, again, it's the etiquette side. Like, come on. Would you want somebody to do that to you? No.
Exactly. Yep.
So, yeah.
So where is, let's, before getting into the future.
I know we've covered a lot of stuff, kind of the past, right?
But still, into the past, you got involved with Ultra 4 and racing as a marketing tool.
Yeah.
At least it appeared that way, and I thought you did it. I thought you did a good job of that too, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, really, the idea was credibility and brand recognition. That's what we were after. Because obviously, we don't sell Ultra 4 car parts.
Right.
Now, what came as a result of that was tremendous industry relationships, because I was on the forefront of Ultra 4 development. Right. So I was pushing parts hard and working with manufacturers to help them improve their products. So that forged some relationships that even today are rock solid and great. It actually allows me inroads to do stuff. Then take that and now trickle that down into the Jeep products that we offer today. I mean, there's no other way I would have gotten all of the experience and be able to do that without me racing Ultra 4 at the highest levels, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
And now the kids are taking over that racing role.
Yes. So it was actually kind of a dream of mine that all three of us got to race for a few years, which was absolutely awesome. Jamie did the UTVs, Jordan was in the 4500 and I was in the 4400. And then basically, because I had developed so many relationships within the industry, I wanted to make sure that I passed those on to Jordan as he moved up to 4400. So it just took him a few years to be ready to do that. 4400 for people who don't know, is a super aggressive class. Like it's the F1 of off-road racing. And man, if you aren't on your A game and ready to like step up and battle, like you got another thing coming. So yeah.
And now it takes, to do, I don't know how these guys are doing, not all of them, but I'm amazed at how many people are able to pull off a whole season with.
Oh, as a privateer.
Yes.
I agree. Like they're selling their soul. I can tell you that they are.
Right.
Or they've just got more money than they know what to do with.
Yeah. If I win the lottery, I'm buying a sailboat. Just saying. Okay, what is next for Genright?
Oh man. So we've got a few things happening, right? So we've got the next Jeep model. We just talked about the JK and what industry changer that was. Now we've got the JL and the JT, the Gladiator. We are neck deep in product development for those vehicles. And on top of that, my oldest son, Jamie, who's been involved in this company for probably the past 8 years, is really kind of stepping up. He's 30 years old now, and he realizes that he doesn't really want to work anywhere else. He has just completely rebuilt my original YJ that we called the Growler, that bright red YJ, into the Tracer version, which is our latest kit that we're offering for the LJ. And it's beautiful. He did a phenomenal job on it. It's got an LS3, it's trick beyond everything. And, I think that he's kind of positioning himself that when I'm ready to retire, he'll be standing there ready to take the reins, which I think is awesome.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then Jordan, is our 4400 racer. I feel bad for him because he decided to take on this super high tech, fully independent suspension car, which has had a huge learning curve to it.
Yes.
Mostly not on our end, but from the manufacturer's end. Right. We've this is because it's a whole new group of manufacturers. It's not the manufacturers that I built when I was racing Ultra 4. This is new people that don't really understand it, and they're kind of used to making trophy truck stuff. So we've had this whole back and forth, how do we make this work? And I think we finally got it figured out. It required us taking a little bit more of the reins on the whole thing, and I think we've got it pretty well dialed. The car is phenomenal. I mean, when I drive it or ride in it, I tense up for stuff that we're about to hit, and it just soaks it up, Rich, like it's not even there. It's unbelievable. It really is. And if he can get it to the point where the car stays together, he'll be an hour ahead of the whole field. I mean, it's that fast.
Right. And it was good that you guys, with your idea this year or your game plan, as I understood it, was to push the vehicle, but not push the vehicle necessarily to win, but to finish the race.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Where, the other all-wheel independent car, Cody's, is, he had like success right away with it, and then now he's been fighting demons, pretty much ever since, it seems like.
Yeah, and it's too bad because they had a sizable lead on the field, right? But I think they were pushing it that little bit too hard.
Yep.
You know,
right at the end of the last couple of miles. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, all they needed to do was get down that last trail, and they would have been home free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's racing. I mean, it's not called winning; it's called racing. Just like fishing is not called catching.
Good point.
And we talked about doctors earlier. Why do they call doctors and lawyers still practicing?
Yep, because they don't have it figured out yet.
I don't want them to figure it out on me. I'd be much better if they just said, you're going in. I don't know. They got to come up with a different word by practicing. But anyway, I digress.
Yep.
So moving on, you guys are still, you've done a really good job of marketing. I think one of the things that you did strongly was the identification of you with Genright. I mean, Genright, everybody goes, oh, Tony. It's Tony from Genright. The whole yellow hat thing. The whole, of course, at one point at Danny's, I was going to go buy like 100 yellow hats and hand them out to everybody. And I never did it. I got too lazy. But
and that was really just a fluke how that happened, because I used to have a yellow fox hat.
Okay.
And when that hat got dirty, it became the way that all of my friends found me in a crowd, right? So I was like, well, why don't I just make a yellow Genright hat? And it was that simple.
Right.
That's all it is. Yeah. And now what's funny is within the hierarchy of my company, everybody has their own colored hat. Right? So my CFO's got a red hat, and our general manager has a blue hat, and our sales guys have their colored hats. I mean, it's just become this fun thing that we all do. And I think it's totally cool. More companies should do fun stuff like that.
Oh, I agree. Because if it's not fun, it's not worth doing.
Yeah. I mean, I meant to mention earlier, there was a couple of things when I started Genright that were basic business premises for me. One was American made. Two was a physical body answers the phone every time.
Right.
So what a lot of people don't realize is that everybody here in the office drives a Jeep. So even the receptionist or the sales guys or whoever you talk to, you're talking to somebody with a Jeep. They'll know that it's a 1/2-inch wrench to take those bolts off to install a fender. I mean, everybody here is into it, and they're here for a reason. They love it like I do. Excellent. Which is totally cool. Yeah.
Well, cool. Is there anything that that we haven't discussed that you would like to share with our listeners?
Today like I mentioned, I'm entrenched in the JL JT, right?
Right.
That these are vehicles that have a lot more creature comforts, that help sell vehicles. They've got dual zone climate control and all these fancy screens and stuff. Well, all of that stuff requires more computers, right? Computers are not what I want as an off-roader, right? I look at that as unreliable. I
Right.
want basics. I want a cable attached to the throttle, not some electronic throttle pedal.
Yes.
So now what I'm doing is I'm spending all of my time mastering these vehicles, right? I'm trying to figure out how to either make them reliable or offer products to make the experience more enjoyable, or change, what's there, right? Because there's a lot of things you can't change. It's, ABS used to be like an add-on to a vehicle. Now it's completely ingrained in the traction control and everything within a vehicle's computer systems. So yeah, it's a totally different animal. And with each new platform that comes out, Jeep advertises it as the best Jeep yet. Well, it depends on what you're doing with it, right? If you're handing the keys to your wife or your daughter and you live in a snow condition, yeah, it's a freaking awesome Jeep, because it's going to keep them safe and alive.
Right.
Okay, but when you want to go lock up the tires or spin the tires or do the stuff that we do, oh man, like it is not happy with that. And if you do it enough times, it just puts it into limp mode, and then you're like, okay, now what do I do? Right.
Yeah, technology is not our friend when it comes to hardcore off road.
That's right. That's right. And the vehicles are manufactured completely different now, and they're using lighter weight, thinner materials. So, it's just a completely different animal. But it's just what we're faced with, right? So years ago, Obama put into place mileage requirements for each of these vehicles, and by certain dates, right? So by 2020, by 2022, 2025, right? They've got to all meet this stuff. Well, we as the public keep demanding, horsepower and all this stuff, which is completely the opposite of what these mandates are. And right now, people don't know it, but when you buy a new JL, about $10,000 of that purchase price is a penalty. Okay, so the penalty was supposed to be going to the car company as a slap on the wrist to make better high mileage vehicles.
Right.
Instead, what the car companies do is they just pass it on. So that because the company is demanding these performance characteristics. So just to give you an idea, when you buy a brand new, like I've got a Dodge 2500 pickup truck, $20,000 of that purchase price is that penalty. So when everybody wonders why is a diesel truck $70,000, $80,000, there you go.
Yeah, because it's not meeting the requirements. I know that at one time, the manufacturers, it was like, okay, your whole line needs to be an average of 36 miles a gallon or whatever. They could say, okay, well, we can get some of those cars up to 50, then we can play down here in the 20, and get the pickup trucks into that, and we can, offset it. And then when the electric vehicles come on, it was the buying carbon credits from Tesla or any of these other companies that, are not going to have any carbon emissions. So you kind of balance that all out. But then the federal government came in and said, oh, okay, we see what you're doing. We still want your money.
Yeah, and I don't know that this is obvious to the public, by the way, because everybody I've ever mentioned it to is like, what? Like, oh, yeah, remember that crap that Obama put into place years ago? Here it is, boys.
Yep.
I know when it, back when Obama was in office, it was like, well, 2020, that's freaking light years away. Well, not anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
True. And it's only going to get worse. Because
it's only getting worse. In fact, I think 2025, and I could be off, it might be 2028, but there will be no more production of gasoline engines, right? Like we're going to see this soon. Like not even a Harley Davidson.
Yeah, that's going to be impossible.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, for the majority of Americans, this is, Rich, like typical, right? You've got these people who live in cities mandating what's happening in the rest of the country. Well, the majority of Americans live in rural areas, right? An electric vehicle doesn't work there.
Yeah, true.
So this is just crazy stuff. It really is.
Hopefully they don't get rid of the things. I know that the internal combustion motor is, to me, the greatest invention ever. And I own a Ford Raptor, and it's a 2012. It's got the 6.2. Now they got the 6 cylinders. I
Yeah,
know
with
that,
the turbos.
yeah, with the
Yeah.
turbos, and everybody goes, "Oh, it's so much better." I don't know.
No.
I like that displacement. There's no
Yeah,
replacement for displacement.
that's
And
right.
this
That's
is
right.
my forever truck. But when I need a new motor, I'm getting the Godzilla motor.
Yeah.
We're going to that 7.3 or 7.4, whatever it is, and then we might put some boost on it. But
Yep.
yeah, I'm not going smaller. Nope.
No, it's an interesting phenomenon, and back to your point, when you look at companies like Honda, they already produce a zero emissions gasoline engine. Like why we're doing this, I don't understand. The gasoline engine has been so refined, right, that it's that good now.
Yeah.
So and even in my JL, that's got the 3.6 liter gas engine. Coupled to that 8-speed transmission, you can go any speed you want down the highway with 40s, right? You do not need a V8 in that thing. So for the public, like this is more than enough. And and by the way, I'm getting like 17 miles a gallon, right? That's not bad on 40s.
Right.
Yeah, and I when I was in Moab, I saw the new. They've got a 4-cylinder Jeep. They call it the 4xe that powers a generator which charges a battery. So it's like a Prius, right? But it's a Jeep, and that's new 49 miles a gallon
Wow.
Jeep. That is available in 2 weeks.
Jeez.
So yeah, it's here. You know.
Well, hopefully we don't get rid of hopefully we don't get rid of all the gas motors.
I know. I'm hoping that they figure out a way to do that. But thanks to Obama, that's what we're kind of faced with. So
Yeah, it's like electric car racing. If it doesn't
right,
have the sounds and the smell of a race, and all you're doing is watching things go around real fast, you might as well, I don't know, play video games. It's
yeah,
yeah, it may take skill to race, but it doesn't have that same ambiance. That
I know.
that same feeling. So
Yeah,
they got to have vroom motors on it, like our old bicycles did when we were kids.
yeah. I'll tell you what is interesting to me is to see, kind of along that vein, those side by sides, those Can-Am side by sides competing in the 4400 class is showing you that a smaller, lighter platform could be an answer.
Right.
So where we've been going bigger engines for all these years, maybe it's time to like downsize the whole thing and go with a lighter platform. So it's got me thinking, I'll tell you that.
Huh. Interesting concept.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, while we wind this down, have you thought of a question you might have for me?
Where are you planning to take racing? I liked the group that you were reaching.
Right.
And are you going to kind of stick with a pre-Ultra 4 platform, or are you going more toward just rock crawling? What's your outlook right now?
For us, our go fast racing days are behind us. The Dirt Riot was a great stepping stone into the Ultra 4 series. It was a place to teach people how to race, how to be successful, how to finish a race. We didn't see enough people coming back into it we had a really large group at one time, and then they started to trickle into Ultra 4, and then they spent some time there, and then they quit, and they're not racing at all anymore. And racing has become so much more localized for those racers that are still racing. They don't want to travel, so it's like, okay, I'm going to race. If I'm in Texas, I want to race, the more of a desert style race, because that's what, it's less damaging than the rocks. They get a chance to go faster. So they're racing like the Texas Desert Racing Association or whatever they call themselves. There's a couple of those going on. For what we were doing, it just, without the car counts, it became impossible to do. And with everybody stepping up or realizing that it's too expensive, we started seeing the rock crawling again expand. So,
Oh, that's good. That's
right
good.
now we had 63 cars at our nationals last year in 2020. So that, and the year before that in 19, we were like 48 cars. And so I think the rock crawling, people are understanding that the rock crawling, you still get that the competitiveness, you get the camaraderie of like-minded individuals, but it's not as budget driven as the racing is, and not as damaging. If you break a link bolt at 2 miles an hour, you can stop before you do any other damage.
Yep.
You break a link bolt at 40, 60, 80 miles an hour, you're taking out a lot of other parts.
Yeah, maybe even the whole car.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
that I think is attractive to people. I mean, I asked Nick Campbell one time, do you miss rock crawling? And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, what I miss the most is I miss when I put the car into the trailer after a rock crawling event, and my prep is when I pull the car out and top off the fuel. And this was, quite a few years ago, and he goes, now it's $10,000 per vehicle per race to get ready for the next race.
That's right. And that doesn't include all the free parts they're getting, right? Because they're replacing a lot of parts.
Yeah, and doing it all themselves.
Yeah.
They don't have a crew that they're paying. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, it's it's a big hit to the wallet. I know people that are racing or raced that, leveraged everything they had, whether it was their house or whatever. Just, most of the time it was, all of a sudden they got, 3 loans against their house so they could go racing. And to me, that's what got us
crazy.
in trouble in in 2008.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
hopefully people have learned and they're not doing that. But, they still want to race. So I think that's where the UTVs are coming in, and the popularity is because they can race, even though a full-blown race UTV is $100,000 now.
$100,000, but it's better than Jordan's $500,000 car.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, we figure that every time we take Jordan's car out, even if it's for the day, it costs us $5,000.
Wow.
Because of, wear and tear on the motor, the transmission, basically everything that's in there only has, we figure the life is 80 hours. So you're just clicking away on the time. So, yeah.
That's a price tag.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you can say, well, gas doesn't cost me that much, blah blah blah. But when you think about having to rebuild the motor and do all these things, it's like that stuff's not cheap. Correct. It's just the way it is.
Just bolt checking and Heims and everything else. All that stuff that wears out. It has to be replaced.
That's right. Yeah.
Well,
and if you don't, then you wreck the whole car.
Exactly.
So that's your choice. Yeah.
Well, Tony, I want to say thank you so much for coming on board and sharing some time with us and talking about your history. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully our listeners learned a lot about you as well. And, good luck in the future with the kids racing program and with what you've got going on with Genright. And, I hope to see you here shortly. I didn't make it to Easter Jeep Safari this year. Hopefully next year will be a lot different and we'll be back to normal, and then we'll be there.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it too, and look forward to seeing you the next time.
All right. You take care, and thank you.
All right. Okay, bye-bye.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.